I was muted.
You
Let's
were
try that
muted.
again.
I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, I couldn't hear me either. My name is Daniel Unmanageable, and welcome to Hard Knox Talks. Tonight, I am going to say something out loud that I haven't said on Hard Knox Talks yet. I myself am a person in recovery. I have been clean for just over 4 years, and about 5 minutes after I got clean, I started hearing tonight's guest's name. And I kept hearing it again and again and again. Everywhere I would go, the recovery community, treatment centers, detoxes, everybody seems to be talking about him. He has been helping teens and adults for over 40 years. He has a bachelor's in arts and a bachelor's of education. He's also certified as a prevention specialist and a Canadian certified addictions counselor. He is also internationally recognized an internationally recognized expert in training on drugs and alcohol, and has created a program that ran for 10 years on the Discovery Channel called Drug Class. There's a bunch more stuff, but I don't want to run out of time. So without any further ado, here's Rand Teed.
Hi, how are you?
Rand, I'm doing well.
The short version of that is that I'm older than dirt.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your own journey?
Sure. So, I've been drug and alcohol free for, if I make it to March 26th, it'll be 49 years. I sobered up in March of 1972 when I was 23 years old. So if you can do math, you can start to figure out how old I am. I grew up in a house that at a bunch of levels was pretty upper middle class, normal-ish, looking at it from the outside. And I got, reasonable amounts of attention and those kinds of things. What I realized afterwards was, looking back on it, was I was also in a house that, if you look at ACE scores, Adverse Childhood Experience scores, which is a really interesting body of research that anybody who is learning anything about the field of addiction needs to take a look at. But I grew up being really uncertain about what was going to happen in my house. My dad, although he was a really popular guy in our community and a really good businessman, also had an alcohol issue. And in public, he was fine. At home, he was never violent or anything like that, but he was very detached from everything that was going on because of his alcohol use. And I think my mom, most of her energy was devoted to trying to kind of manage him, I guess. And so I grew up kind of fending for myself in lots of ways. And because of the situations, didn't really teach me how to emotionally connect with anybody. And so when I got sent off to school, I didn't really fit in. I didn't know how to fit in. I was uncomfortable at school. I remember I didn't like going to school. I always had stomach aches or headaches or I didn't feel good or whatever. So I tried as much as I could to not go to school. And when I was 12, my friend Ronnie and I decided we wanted to see what getting drunk was like. And, I'd seen alcohol around my house all my life and knew that it changed people a little bit. And we went out. He stole a bunch of homemade choke cherry wine from his house, and we went out and drank a bunch of that and accomplished our mission. We got quite intoxicated. I didn't know about the throwing up part, and I got really sick, and we got caught, of course, because we were not thinking very well. And I got in trouble. And the next day my mom punished me because I think she wanted to make sure that I didn't do that again. And I'm thinking, I don't really want to do that again because I felt so horrible. And I think about 4 or 5 days later, I did it again because there was something about it that I liked. I liked when I look back on it, I like the escape. I think I was telling myself then that it made me feel good. And the reality is that it made me feel less. And that's what I liked. And then that just started a very out of control spin into more alcohol, drugs, all that kind of stuff. Just in spite of the fact I have all sorts of education now, it took me 6 years to get through 4 years of high school because I was just having way too much fun. And so, in lots of ways, I've been incredibly fortunate that that happened to me because it taught me a bunch of stuff, life experience wise, but it also created a huge interest in me to find out and understand what that's all about, like what fuels that kind of behavior, what fuels addiction, what fuels substance use disorders, and what can we do to help prevent that. So I spent most of my adult life working with adolescents, and I worked with lots of adults too, but I've spent a lot of time in schools teaching kids about drug and alcohol stuff in a very non-judgmental way so that they can make better informed decisions. So that's the short version.
Yeah, highly relatable. I can relate to the never really feeling like I fit in, and it took a long time to realize that I didn't need to fit in. So anyways, I was digging around in the archives of your drug class website, and I found that one of the topics of your show that you discussed is drug and alcohol use in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you tell us about that?
Well, Saskatchewan in particular has a fairly high incidence of drug and alcohol use. And one of the things that I try and do is help educate employers and employees about drug and alcohol issues. Because most people, when they start thinking about a drug and alcohol problem, they picture somebody who, for lack of a better term, might be the town drunk or the town drug addict. They imagine, they have a visualization of somebody who's really bad, and then they look at themselves and they say, well, I'm not that person, so then I'm okay. And so what I try and do with all of the education pieces that I do is really help break that down so that people can understand that things don't have to get that bad in the first place. And in the second place, they started somewhere. And so I use a lot of screening tools to help people self-assess where they're at with drugs and alcohol. So one of the workplaces I worked in was a electrical company, like a commercial electrical outfit, and there was about 15 employees plus the office staff and the owners, and he pulled all his guys in for an afternoon, and there was kind of grumbling, like, why the heck do we have to listen to this stuff? There's nothing the matter with what I'm doing. And one of the things that I understand about this stuff is that if you're going to talk about it or teach about it, you really need to make it interesting and have it have some emotional impact, because people have a huge emotional relationship with their drug of choice. And so because of that, they it's almost like a romantic relationship. So it's hard to get them to think about it in any other way. So using screening tests and videos, and I do an awful lot of work helping people understand how drug and alcohol use impacts brain function. And most people understand that if they get too drunk, they get less smart. But what they don't understand is that as soon as you start drinking too much, your brain's affected by that all week. Like if you're a weekend binge drinker, your brain doesn't recover from that in a week, and so you're going through the week functioning at a lower level than you could be, and so that's important information for employers to help them understand, why some employees might be, not very productive on Mondays or Fridays. But it's also really valuable for employees because if they think they're okay and they're not, this gives that kind of education gives them a huge opportunity to reassess where they're at. And I know every time I've done one of those, people have said, like, oh my God, I didn't realize I was drinking too much. I didn't realize that smoking weed was doing that to my brain. I thought I was okay because the circle that I exist in is doing the kind of the same thing. So we normalize the level that we're at really, really quickly. So in order to educate people, we have to really show them what the truth is, not just what they think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to agree. It can start to feel normal after a while if it goes unchecked. I've worked in several shops throughout my career. I'm a journeyman welder, where it was normal. It was normal for the guys to go out to the parking lot and smoke a joint at break, you know, and it almost seemed as though management would just sort of turn a blind eye to it because nobody was getting hurt. Not realizing that the level of impairment is slowing everyone down, whether they see it or not. I believe it's called presenteeism.
Yeah.
So
I've got a bunch of data. If you want to look at it, I can show you. It kind of goes through substances, and I'm going to share a screen, and we're going to do a Chrome tab, and we're going to do costs and harms. And I got to click the share audio, but I talk to myself. It's one of the.
That's okay. You're actually talking to all of us.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, here we go.
So here's a look at substance use attributable death counts across Canada. And this is the most recent set of statistics that we have. There's a new set coming out probably next year. So, we consistently hear a ton of stuff about opiate deaths. And if you look at this, opiate deaths are significantly lower than alcohol deaths and significantly lower than tobacco deaths. But we don't hear discussions about those. Do I have
maybe just point at them with your cursor there, Rand. The letters are kind of small, and a lot of people are probably watching on their phones, so they might not be able to.
Okay, so can you see the red dot there?
I can see it. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm assuming they can see it too. So that's alcohol. So 2017, almost 20,000 people in Canada died from alcohol-related illnesses, and that's likely underreported because not all of them get reported accurately. Opiate deaths was around 5,000, a little under 5,000. Tobacco deaths was up about 48,000 people. And cannabis, there's a few other central nervous depressants like benzodiazepines and stuff like that. Cocaine's low, and then meth and stuff like that is a little bit lower. But if you look at the media coverage, everything's talking about this, about the opiates, and these two much larger issues are not getting looked at.
So why do you think that is?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. One of them, I think there's likely some political pressure not to get into the alcohol issue because it's such a socially acceptable drug. And alcohol companies are also companies that provide support to politicians.
and there's taxation. You think that might play into it?
Yeah, well, yeah. Although the costs vastly exceed the tax input. Like the cost of treating alcoholism or alcohol problems are much greater than the tax dollars that it brings in. So if we look at substance use attributable costs, so every year in Canada, it's around 48 billion, that's with a B, dollars of substance use attributable costs. So so these numbers are in billions of dollars. So health costs are about $12 billion, lost productivity costs closer to $20 billion.
And that's across all industry?
Yes.
Wow.
And so that's people not showing up at work, people showing up at work, functioning at a much lower level than they should be, those kinds of things. The costs of replacement workers, if somebody's taking sick time when it's really a drug or alcohol issue. And I mean, certainly industry has a duty to accommodate if somebody admits that they have a drug or alcohol problem. The way our workplace legislation works is that companies have to give that person an opportunity to get help. They can't be fired or punished because they have a drug or alcohol issue. So criminal justice costs are about $10 billion. And I mean, and then there's some other costs. If we look at total health care, the Saskatchewan is this color, the lighter green color. So this is a per capita cost. So alcohol, Canadian wise, is about $150 per capita per person. Saskatchewan is higher than that. It's closer to $160. So every pulse in the province, it's costing us $160. Tobacco is higher in Saskatchewan. Cannabis is higher in Saskatchewan. Opiates are a little higher in Saskatchewan. Everything in this province, in terms of substance use problems and the accordant costs, are higher than they are in the rest, in the averages for the rest of the country. And if we look at lost productivity, again, looking at Canada in comparison to Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan is a lot higher alcohol-wise, a little bit lower in tobacco. I'm not sure why. Higher in cannabis, but even in opiates for the rest of the country, and the rest of them are fairly close. Meth a little bit higher. But what this shows us is that this province has a much higher than average tendency to misuse or overuse substances. So I think that's probably worth talking about.
Yeah, well, I know growing up in a small town in Saskatchewan, I mean, that's just what you did,
Oh yeah, well, I mean, that's what we did too.
Yeah. I worked all week so that I could get loaded Friday night.
Yeah, and then Friday became Thursday.
Yeah, and then Monday morning, and then Wednesday morning, and yeah. So, what can employers do to practice some sort of early recognition?
Well, I think the most important thing that they can do is to start to create some education programs, whether it's learn at lunch stuff or those kinds of programs that don't judge people but are purely a health and safety education piece. Like they'll do health and safety education on new procedures, they'll do health and safety education on new tools, they'll do health and safety education on other issues. But I think there's just a not enough understanding of how big a problem this actually is. Like if you break that $48 billion down to per capita, it's about, in Saskatchewan, it's about $1,550 a person. And, you know, and that costs everybody in this province that much money,
Wow.
whether you're doing it or not.
Yeah. And that's
So,
yearly.
yeah, it's every
Yeah.
year, and it's really an education piece. Like I've been working, you know, as a education and drug and alcohol education and prevention specialist for a long time, and I know that teaching people about this stuff in a manner that doesn't, you know, it isn't a scare tactic. It's just like really straightforward. If you do this, this is what happens to your brain, and this is what happens to other parts of your body, and uh, and then it's always the question: is that what you want for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And I've had, you know, hundreds and hundreds of kids come up and say, you know, I didn't know that. I'm not going to do that anymore. You know, and there's lots that don't change too, but typically the ones who don't are the ones that have already developed a what we I mean, we're trying to change the term addiction to substance use disorder because it's easier for people to kind of take a look at it.
Right.
Um, so uh, if people start to understand sooner that what they're doing is over the line, then it's easier for them to change. If you wait till it's a significant problem, it's much harder for them to deal with, and it's much more costly to deal with.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
know I get people referred to me from workplaces who fail a drug test, for example, and usually a little bit of education with them is all that they need, because when you start explaining stuff, it's always, I didn't know that. If I would have known that ahead of time, I wouldn't have done that. Like Canada has low risk drinking guidelines, and they're not well advertised, but they are scientifically researched guidelines that tell you if you drink at this level or lower, you're significantly reducing the potential of harm. Like in 2017, 77,000 people in Canada were hospitalized for alcohol-related issues. That's not like showing up drunk. That's health, like liver problems, stomach problems, throat cancer, uh, other vehicle accidents, all sorts of things related to uh, medical problems created by alcohol. And if people stuck to those low-risk drinking guidelines, it would significantly reduce the healthcare costs. It would also significantly reduce the profit margins in alcohol. I know in Yukon territories, the Yukon government tried to put health warnings on the alcohol bottles and also drink equivalents on the alcohol bottles. And the alcohol industry fought them in court and successfully prevented that from happening.
How do you think they got away with that? They do that on cigarettes.
Well, what's happened with cigarettes needs to be what happens with alcohol, and there was huge pushback from the tobacco companies when governments tried to institute, like, you know, the warning stuff on tobacco packages. So you know, we just our political leaders have to push harder for our best interest.
Right. So what role in this do you think stigma plays with the lack of education and the lack of education, and it's seemingly the government not taking the action that a lot of people feel it should?
Well, I think stigma is a much bigger issue than we realize. Like if you know, when we started talking, I was well, and you used the term addict and also alcoholic, and those two terms are fairly stigma charged to begin with, because like I said before, when you use that term, you pretty quickly get a picture in your head of what that person is going to look like.
Yeah, and
And
you're right, and a lot of people in the addictions field are struggling with that right now. I know I speak with people weekly, and everybody's saying that we need to change how we address people with substance use disorders, but people are still slipping, and I still slip myself.
well, I do too.
I'm doing my best, man.
Well, I like I do too. And so if we use the term substance use disorder, there's actually really good research that indicates that that opens up a much greater possibility for acceptance that you can do something about this. Like I had a client come in, and the first words out of their mouth, because the family had been complaining about this person's alcohol use, and you know they were successful. It was a successful person, you know, a big house, lots of money, bills all paid, all those kinds of things. And the first words out of their mouth were, "Well, I'm not an alcoholic." And I said, "Okay." I said, "How would you feel about having a substance use disorder?" And they looked at me and said, "What's that?" And so I explained the criteria for a substance use disorder, and they said, "Oh my God, I'm drinking too much." And
Yeah,
not
reminds.
everybody that drinks too much has to completely quit drinking. Like if you've developed an alcohol dependency, and it's fairly severe, you might be looking at having to stop drinking completely. But lots of alcohol problems really fall into the bad habit category, and you can change that. And so, like those low risk, do you know what the low risk drinking guidelines are?
Um, I remember
This is a
looking at them.
test. This is a test, Daniel.
You can't call me out like that just on the spot.
I'm calling you out like that.
Okay, well, I remember looking at them some time ago and thinking, like, they were saying something like 4 drinks a week is considered like heavy drinking.
No, that's not what
That's
they say.
wrong. That's not
That's
what they
wrong.
say.
What
See, now
the,
I'm blaming you for this, for me being wrong on a live stream.
you can try that.
Tell us
So,
how it is, Rand.
okay, so the Canadian Low Risk Drinking Guidelines say that for an adult male, no more than 3 drinks a day and 2 days a week with no drinking. And for an adult female, 2 drinks a day and 2 days a week with no drinking. And so the reason that there's a difference is that women have less body water than men do. So when they drink alcohol, their blood alcohol level goes up faster. Women are also missing an liver enzyme that helps process alcohol. So their blood alcohol level stays up a little bit longer. And so the research indicates that if people drink at that level, they're significantly reducing all of the health risks, or most of the health risks related to alcohol use. And but I mean, if you look at those levels, most people are not going to get drunk. So that pushes the alcohol use into social drinking. And Saskatchewan has a pretty strong culture of let's go get hammered, because that's what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so those low risk alcohol use guideline numbers are difficult for people to understand. If if you can't imagine yourself drinking at a level that low, you likely have a degree of alcohol use disorder. And if that's explained to you in the proper way, you will start to think about that. if you use those words, alcoholic, everybody immediately gets defensive and says, I'm not an alcoholic. And so, from our end, like from the clinician end, it's our responsibility to help to present information to people in a manner that's going to be useful to them. And so, same thing with drug addict. Like there was an interesting study that, I forgot his name right now, but it was one of the Harvard guys that's done a whole bunch of work on this stuff. He took same story, presented it to a group of clinicians. One half got the story that a person with alcoholism had a relapse and how should they be managed at work, and the other people got a same story, but instead of alcoholism, a person with substance use disorder. And there was a marked difference just from those difference in those two words on how those clinicians would approach that person. The ones that had the alcoholic were a lot more sort of punitive focused and critical, and the clinicians who were presented with the substance use disorder material were a lot more compassionate and much more interested in trying to help this person rather than create a hardline consequence. Mm-hmm. And so that built-in stigma makes it hard to ask for help. And just if people are thinking alcoholic and addict, they're not going to want to ask for help because they don't want to be that. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So where does the marijuana maintenance movement and the legalization of marijuana play into all of this?
Well, I wasn't particularly opposed to legalization of cannabis products because I think it creates a much safer and a much more controllable supply. One of the things that's happened with cannabis over the years is that it's gotten stronger and stronger and stronger, and as it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, it has increasing negative impact on brain function. So if somebody an adult wants to use cannabis recreationally, then it's a huge advantage to be able to go into a store and get a product that's maybe 14 or 15% THC and maybe 10% CBD, cannabidiol, which is actually the medicinal cannabinoid that's in marijuana. Prior to legalization, everything was just getting stronger and stronger. And even though people talked about cannabis as medicine, most of the cannabis that was available on the black market had little or no CBD in it.
And it can reach up to 30% THC, from what I understand.
Oh yeah, and then there's that whole new set of products. There's waxes and butters and shatter, those kinds of things. Well, gummies are different. These are highly refined THC products. They're up above 80% THC. So that's kind of the difference between drinking a beer and drinking a 26 at Jack Daniels or whatever, like in terms of brain function. But if you're looking to get high, that's faster and quicker. And then there's a whole bunch of devices like they're called dab pens, which come with a product that's really high in THC. So again, I don't think we did nearly enough public education about what cannabis was and sort of what's okay and what's not okay. And there's definitely a culture out there that thinks that there's absolutely nothing the matter with cannabis, and it's okay to use it 4 or 5 times a day. And there's that confusion about medical cannabis and recreational cannabis. And and that confusion exists in the population, but it also exists in the medical community. I know I've done a fair amount, not enough, but a fair amount of physician education around cannabis products and cannabis use. And most of them were really misinformed about what you could use it for. And they were kind of stuck because it had been approved legally through the Health Canada. People were coming and saying, I want medical cannabis. And I mean, the term medical cannabis is really a misnomer. When you talk about medical cannabinoids, CBD, cannabidiol, has quite a lot of medicinal value, and there's more and more research going on with it now, which is the other advantage of it being legalized, is that it's much easier to get research grants to work on a product that isn't illegal. But there's a belief that tied sort of getting high to getting well. Like THC isn't particularly useful for pain, but people think that it's useful for pain, and so tell their doctor, I've got this pain or that pain, and cannabis helps it. And so the doctor would give them a prescription for it. Now they don't have to do the doctor thing. They can just go to the store and pick it up. And so workplaces have had to, adjust some of their policies depending on safety sensitivity. And most places still have an appropriate hard line about, if you're operating equipment or, machinery that has potential to hurt yourself or somebody else, you need to be THC free.
Yeah, and that's causing a lot of problems in the safety sensitive industries too, because people are thinking, well, I have a prescription for this, I should be able to smoke it whenever I want, and then they've got a doctor saying, yes, he can smoke this, he's had a prescription. So employers are running into a lot of problems, and even if somebody wants to, say, smoke a joint on the weekend, we know that cannabis is fat soluble, and it stays with you for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And someone will smoke on the weekend, and then say a safety incident happens on a Wednesday, and they have to go for a drug test, and they fail.
Yeah.
So now they're going for a substance use assessment, and the employer's paying for that, and only to find that they don't have a substance use disorder. They just need some education, and then the employer has to pay for that too. You know, so I can see how proactive education would
makes
be
a huge difference. It's valuable for everybody.
Because a lot of people, like from what I understand, and I've been talking to a company that does assessments, they say up to 80% of their people that they see that have failed a drug test, they simply need some education because they don't know what's actually going on in their brain and in their body,
Yeah. Well, I think the last 10 that we've done, I think one person had a substance use disorder and everybody else needed that education piece.
Mm-hmm.
So it would save employers a lot of money if they would bring somebody in to do the education piece up front and say, this is our policy, this is what we're doing, this is how these things affect you, this is why we're doing it, we're not just trying to give you a hard time. And so there's a comment popped up there by Renee, and I was just going to say that, thank you, Renee, that if you get an opioid prescription, like for pain, you can't use that if you're in a safety sensitive job, or at least it's carefully monitored. So
yeah.
So I mean, medicine's medicine, and too much of anything is a bit of an issue. And then you use the other term, the marijuana maintenance thing, which is something that I find a bit disconcerting. There's a lot of people in recovery programs who are still actively using high THC cannabis because somewhere or another they've convinced themselves that it's not a problem, that it's okay. And really all, what you are doing, if you're doing that, is you're continuing to feed that chemical dependency that you had on whatever other drug it was. And certainly the consequences might be different in terms of behavior and in terms of kind of social impact. But cannabis is a drug that really flattens out your emotional response to things. And so one of the things that happens is that, like, there's a huge number of endocannabinoid receptors in your limbic system, which is part of your brain that manages emotions. And when you're using cannabis regularly, it really turns your emotional capacity down, which is why some people like it, because then stuff doesn't bother them. But it isn't just the bad stuff that you lose, it's also the capacity to enjoy and feel the good stuff. And so you're still missing out on a percentage of your life by doing that.
We've got a question here from our resident heavy hitter. Can you read that?
How about cannabis use for people who have known and self-accepted substance use disorder? Can you comment on that? Well, I kind of just did.
You kind of just did, yeah, actually.
Yeah. So really, what in really simple terms, what you've done is switch drugs. Like maybe you stopped drinking, which was causing a set of problems for you, but now you switch to cannabis, which is going to cause a different set of problems for you. But we tell ourselves it's okay because of we heard that it's medicine. And one of the things that I constantly am trying to tell people is that everything you think that isn't necessarily true. Just because you think something doesn't mean that it's right.
Yeah, your best thinking got you there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. I think we covered all our topics. One comment that I did find on your drug class site is that there's more to quitting than quitting. So what can you tell? What is recovery all about?
Well, that's a really important topic and a really interesting question. So, most people, when they discover that they might be drinking or drugging too much, are kind of afraid to quit because that's become such a significant part of their lifestyle that they don't know what they're going to do. Like, how will I have fun? How will I interact with my friends? What happened? I don't know. You disappeared, Daniel. Can anybody out there hear me? Daniel disappeared.
Oh, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm still here. Now, what happened was my dog is bugging the crap out of me, and I was going to let him outside. So what I was going to do is put you on full screen and sneak away, but you called me out. So now I don't know what to do.
We'll go let the dog. I just didn't know if we were still even, it was still even happening. I'll just keep talking.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Okay. So when I say there's more to quitting than quitting, just quitting is an uncomfortable idea for a lot of people because they don't know what they're going to do. So one of the things that recovery programs do, and it doesn't have to be 12-step stuff. There's all sorts of different approaches to moving away from problematic substance use. But really what's happening is you're relearning how to manage your emotions. Just about all substance use becomes emotional management, or particularly problematic substance use becomes an emotional management piece for people. And so their stress response system gets hardwired into, if I feel stressed, I want a drink, or if I feel stressed, I want a joint, or if I still feel stressed, I want a pill, whatever. Doesn't really matter what it is. And so when you take the drug away, the person has to find some things to replace that. And one of the conversations that I really try and have with people is, okay, what did you, before you got into the drug and alcohol things, what did you used to do that you really like to do? And whatever it is, whether it's playing street hockey or ping pong or doing puzzles or going for walks or whatever, most of the time they've lost all of that or a degree of that. So helping a person find their passion and get some passion back in their lives for something that they really, really like to do is incredibly valuable for them, because then the quitting isn't just a negative. It isn't just taking something away. It's about rebuilding your life patterns, your lifestyle, your approach to life, so that you start to get significantly more satisfaction out of it. Like you could just stop using drugs or alcohol and be grumpy and miserable, or you can stop using drugs and alcohol and start to rebuild your life and get excited about things again, and not have all that negative stuff going on. One of the conversations I usually have with people is, well, how much are you spending on that a month? And they'll start figuring it out, and then you can start looking at, okay, well, you're going to have that much more money in your pocket this month. What are you going to do with it? And that becomes a positive look at an advantage to making some of those changes. And I guess the other piece of this that's worth talking about is the whole rewiring your brain piece, because substance use has created a set of patterned responses to different kinds of situations, which people talk about as cravings. When something happens, it triggers a brain response that normally, when that happened, you would go and drink or drug or whatever. And so part of the recovery process is practicing something new when that happens, so that you don't have to do that. You now have choices on how you're going to respond to different kinds of things. So most of the people that I work with, I'm encouraging a degree of exercise, and it doesn't have to be like running marathons. Like a half an hour walk a day is incredibly valuable. I help people try and understand and get into meditation. I work with people and try and get them to understand the concept of mindfulness, where you're not thinking about 18 things at once, where you're just paying attention to what you're doing at the moment. And if you can learn to do that, your stress level just like drops. Like, it's really stressful to trying to do one thing, but thinking about 8 other things at the same time, or worrying about what you're going to do next. The past and the future just aren't real. The only thing that's real is what we're doing right at that particular moment. So when I say there's more to quitting than quitting, one of the reasons I say that is because people kind of get afraid about, what am I going to do if I don't have that? Do I have to like sit in my basement and like watch old reruns of Friends or something for the rest of my life, or whatever? Whatever. If you tie a negative thought to the idea of quitting, it's going to make it harder for you. And so, like, there's 4 questions that I would like everyone to get just tattooed on their arm. Is what you're thinking true? Is it really true? How are you feeling because of how you're thinking? And how would you feel if you thought differently? And one of the things that we need to understand is that how we feel is not somebody else's fault or because of anything else. How we are feeling about a particular thing comes from how we are thinking about it. We have taught ourselves to respond and to think that way. And if the feelings are uncomfortable, we can change those uncomfortable feelings by changing the thought, by starting to think about things differently. So recovery is really about sort of reprogramming your patterned responses to all sorts of different kinds of situations. And it actually becomes really rewarding and really interesting because we start to have fun and we start to learn to appreciate little things. Like typically people with substance issues are extremely good at finding stuff that's the matter. Like they find stuff that they don't like, everything's they kind of get stuck looking at the negative, because when they're unhappy, it creates an instant excuse to
use.
To drink or drug.
Like I've said that I've realized that about myself. My brain seemed to be wired in such a way that it knew if it could make me miserable enough, I would use. So it's sort of a twisted reward. It gives itself a twisted reward system, right? My thoughts would just go completely haywire in an effort to drive myself crazy enough to get high.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
And I mean, and human beings have what's called a negativity bias that's been hardwired into our brain for like 10,000 generations, which was protective 10,000 generations ago, because you would notice if something tasted bad, you wouldn't eat it. You would notice if something was dangerous, you'd stay away from it. And so our negative attention ability was heightened, and that was passed on genetically. So that still exists in the same way, but we're not nearly at as much risk as we were 10,000 generations ago. So we have to work harder to kind of override that natural brain tendency to focus on what's negative to protect ourselves. Like it's there, you notice it, but then you have to start overriding that with positive thought patterns, like looking for what's good. Like one of the things that I've been working on myself for a long time, and I've been trying to help other people understand, and they always look at me like I'm nuts, but I keep talking about it anyway, is when something happens that you don't like, if you get mad at it, you're going to make it worse. You activate your stress response system. As soon as you activate your stress response system, the big parts of your prefrontal cortex, which is your thinking and problem solving part of your brain, stop working. Because as soon as your stress response system is activated, everything's focused on protection, and it's either fight, run, or hide. And so you get totally kind of wrapped up in those things, and you can't see anything else. When something happens that you don't like, if you say to it, "Oh, thanks for showing up. What are you trying to teach me? What can I learn from this this feeling of irritation? What can I learn from this feeling of impatience? Why are you here?" And as soon as you sort of welcome something in, that stress response system relaxes, and then you can think. And once you can start to think, then you're increasing your capacity to work through something. And as you work through it, you're starting to lay down a new thought pattern that you can use again. I mean, the neurobiological principle is neurons that fire together wire together. And so as you start to practice accepting negative things as something that are of value to you, you start to the old thought pattern of of getting mad or getting depressed or whatever starts to dissolve, and this new problem-solving pathway starts to grow.
Yeah, wow. Well, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom with us. It's very enlightening.
Oh, I was honored that you asked me to come on.
Well, before I let you go, we do have one more question here, and it's kind of off topic about what we were talking about, but Danielle here would like to know if you have any information about the crystal meth treatment center in Estevan.
Sure. Well, it's not exclusively crystal meth. They will take people with other substance addictions as well. I know that they're significantly backed up already. The initial plan was to have, I believe, 20 treatment beds and 6 post-treatment beds and 6 pre-treatment beds. The COVID situation has complicated that quite a bit because they have to isolate people when they come in for 14 days before they're moved into the general treatment stream. So it's kind of slowed down the intake process. I've talked to a couple of people who've gone through there and come out, and they were quite pleased with it. I also had a couple of people who left early, but that's typical of any treatment center because it's scary to change for some people.
Absolutely.
In lots and lots of ways, I'm a really strong believer that the name of the drug doesn't matter. The treatment is very similar because you're always trying to just rewire those brain pathways. The issue with crystal meth is that sometimes takes a little bit longer.
Right. Oh, okay. Well, I hope that answered your question, Danielle. We are going to let Rand get back to his evening, but before we do, I would just like to give a shout out to Possibilities Recovery. I was speaking with Tanner today from Possibilities, and he was telling me that they are having a fundraiser called Bright Future, fundraiser for Possibility Recovery. It's live auction art pieces, guest speakers, local band music videos, video production by Campfire, and it's emceed by Ron Peterson. I hope I said all of that right. If you're listening, Tanner, you can give me crap about it if I didn't. And I put a link down in the comments. You can check it out yourself if you like. I believe it's next weekend. And on that, I am going to say goodnight, Rand, and thank you again for coming. And we will see you all. We will see you all next week on Hard Knox Talks. Good night.
Take care. Bye.